So with all of that in mind, I actually had the pleasure of speaking to Charles Santiago, newly reappointed chairperson with the National Water Services Commission, about how SPAN is readying Malaysia for El Nino. Let's take a look.
Charles, thank you so much for making time for us. Let's get started. I'd really like to know what are your plans for management of water resources that we have available in a transparent manner ahead of course, the anticipated El Nino phenomenon in July.
Yeah, let me just begin by saying that the water sector and the sewerage sector are very dynamic and yet very challenged sectors. For example, in the water sector, we are now faced with climate change. Climate change, of course, many ways of many definitions to it. But I think one phenomenon that we can see is the extreme weather patterns, where you have so much of water in 2 months and then dry completely for the next 6 months. This is a worldwide phenomena, and Malaysia will go through this. And as you mentioned, that in coming July, August, September, maybe even October, we will have the El Nino effect. And from what I understand, the El Nino effect will be quite drastic, though, which means that it will impact on drinking water and the availability of water in general, because it will lead to rivers drying up, and therefore we'll have to depend on dams in order to support the water system. So going forward, I think one of the things that we have to do, keeping in mind the challenges of climate change, is to actually have more storage space, to make available more storage space, which also means that you need to have more capacity. That means more treatment plants have to be built in order to ensure that there is enough water for the consumer as well as for industries. And along with that, I think it's also very important that the government incentivizes recycling, especially for businesses that requires lots and lots of water. So therefore, maybe there's something has to be done to work with these organizations, these factories that are producing these products, in order to recycle water that we already have. And there's something else along with that is we also can use wastewater as part of recycling that can go towards industrial centers, industrial production centers in the different parts of the country. So there are many things that one should be looking at, and some of it is in plan, have been planned, some of it needs to be executed, but some of it has to be developed further, though. But the critical question is maybe a risk analysis for Malaysia going forward for the next 10 years on water scarcity in relation to climate change.
Right. Could we move along quickly to what kind of scrutinies can companies involved in management on distribution of water as well as water resource expect immediately, considering that, El Nino, we're already feeling some of the grimy weather-related impacts in the end of March?
Yeah, I mean, as part of transparency, there's already an integrated plan that we developed in 2018 and 2022, which has been implemented since then. So now the integrated plan has to be taken to a different level, where every element of decision, including financial decision and water efficiency, water availability, has to be made public through various social media, including the websites of companies. Some companies are doing it, some operators are doing it, I should say operators are doing it. And along with that, what I think something that we can do going forward is to look at ESH, environment sustainability, as well as governance, ESG, as a way forward. That brings together a whole lot of things that our companies or our operators have to follow. And it'll be important not only for the operators to follow, but for the entire supply chain to follow. ESG is now a requirement for the first board companies, and therefore I think it's something is a standard that the government is pushing forward, including Bank Negara. So I think the water sector and the sewerage sector can maximize, can be more efficient, can be more sustainable, and better govern in terms of transparency of the finances, as well as of the management of the water system itself.
Thanks, Charles. And speaking about, of course, water management, we've actually come across plenty of water contamination issues of late. What can be done, in your perspective, to curb this from occurring at least as frequently as it has been?
Well, I think the minister a month ago pointed out in Parliament that the penalty for pollution will be increased, I think, to 10 million, if I'm not mistaken. That's one clear effort, which could be a barrier for people who want to pollute the water source. But I think also something that should go along with that is the scrutiny over transport providers, third-party waste transport providers. These are vehicles that are owned by third parties that are used by companies in order to transport toxic material. And what is important is that these companies should be licensed or given permits by the local council or maybe by the Ministry of Transport. And their movement should be monitored throughout the journey from the factory concern right up to the recycling center. And if you stop halfway along the, in front of a traffic light, it'll be there for 2 minutes, and then you can be tracked. But suddenly, if you disappear for half an hour, then there'll be a query, and why are you stopping for half an hour? Which means that something has gone wrong, in terms of your transport. So that is another way of ensuring. It means there must be some kind of a monitoring gadget or mechanism in those vehicles. The problem that we have is some of the big companies have it already. It's already being followed by the big companies, but it's the third-party waste transporters, if I can use that expression, who are actually not following the law. So they are the one who actually take some of this stuff and dump it in the river source and so on and so forth. So this has to stop. So I think one of it is actually this involves the MOT, Ministry of Transport, as well as local councils.
Absolutely. So really closing that loop. And lastly, Charles, of course, climate pressures are going to continue. What are some medium to long-term strategies whereby which we can actually encourage increased public as well as private sector investments, collaborations for water management in Malaysia?
Well, I think the biggest challenge going forward will be water scarcity, which means that we have to use water less in our factories, less in our offices, less in our households. And one of the things that we can do at a very urgent, like tomorrow morning you can start doing it, is your rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting has proved very successful in lots of countries. Some people in Malaysia are also doing that, but it is not being taken up seriously by big corporations who actually are water guzzlers, though. So they need to actually go into rainwater harvesting as a way forward to reduce the amount of water that comes out of our treatment plants as well as the rivers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Charles. I think once again, it's really boiling it down to what are the main points that we can do to reduce the impacts of El Nino, not just on individuals, but also the economy. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.